Alright, so in this video I want to go over the craftable weapons from seasons 20 to 23, namely the weapons that I've crafted and masterworked and weapons that I still plan on masterworking but have already crafted. Keep in mind I've acquired the patterns for all of the seasonal weapons since the Witch Queen released, since the introduction of craftable weapons. I've crafted every single weapon, and I usually do so about midway through their respective seasons. And I've pretty much, I've got the patterns for all of them, and I've crafted all of them, but recently doing a vault cleaning, I decided there's no point in hanging on to weapons that I've crafted that I haven't even leveled up in over a year, because clearly I'm not going to use them, or at least not likely to, and so taking up a space in my vault just seems a little bit redundant, especially considering we have so many other things to pack in there. So I'm going to be covering basically the essentials, because Bungie has increased the red border patterns that you can get. I think you get them every day now. I wouldn't know because, like I said, I already have them all. As far as I know, if you're missing patterns, now is the time to go and do it, right? So it has to be from seasons 20 to 23. So Season of Defiant, Season of the Deep, Season of the Witch, and Season of Wish, right? So I'm not going to be covering any other craftable weapons other than those. And there's a couple seasonal weapons that also drop from those seasonal vendors that aren't craftable, which I imagine are going to be going away as well. And when I say going away, I don't think they're going to be going away permanently. You're probably going to have access to them still from like random drops from Banshee or Zur, like if they're selling them that day or something like that. But unfortunately, like that's totally RNG. You never know when the vendors are going to have them. And you have to have deep sight harmonizers to actually apply a red border to them and craft them, unless we get some kind of major crafting overhaul in the final shape. And by the way, if you haven't seen, my last video was about the Brave Arsenal. Next week we're going to be getting extra shiny drops, and right now we're getting extra Brave weapon drops in general. So if you just want to farm your Brave weapons, go and check my channel for my last video there. It's a bit of a long one, but like this one, just kind of thinking that you can maybe just pop an earbud in your ear and go do some chores, go to work, what have you, and you don't necessarily have to watch this. I'll try and be vocally descriptive so that you know what I'm talking about. And if there's any weapons that I left out here or god rolls that you disagree with and you crafted yours a different way, let me know in the comments. I'm always happy to talk to you guys in the comments, and I appreciate that. So without further ado, I will get into the kinetic slot here. So as you can see, I've got 2 scatter signals crafted with Masterworks. The first one here is the kind of the general meta consensus for most players: overflow and controlled burst, both enhanced. This weapon is just, it's pretty much the highest DPS weapon as far as fusion rifles go, so it pairs very well with something like Dragon's Breath. A lot of people were doing their solo flawless dungeons with just Dragon's Breath and Scatter Signal. Controlled burst is a 20% damage buff on sustained damage, so your first shot does no extra damage, but as long as you follow up with another shot, and I believe your first shot has to land, like you have to land all your pellets, kind of like a 1-2 punch, and then your follow-up shots all do 20% extra damage until you put a pause on your damage. So if you stop to reload, if you swap weapons, if you just hesitate, you will lose controlled burst and you'll have to reproc it again with another shot. So the idea here with overflow is that you can do sustained damage for longer, obviously, because you can you could have like 16 shots all in one mag, and then you proc controlled burst just with your first shot. Your follow-up shots, if you have 15 follow-up shots, they're all doing 20% more damage. So that's why that's really good. Also, the other one that I crafted here, which I actually have come to appreciate this one a little bit more than the other one. It also has controlled burst on it, but I also put enhanced slice, right? So I've got double enhanced perks, of course, but I actually prefer slice, because even for doing solo flawless dungeons, being able to acquire 40% damage resistance from the most threatening target in the encounter, like the boss, is actually a huge benefit, especially for solo flawless stuff. Also, this season we've had access to artifact mods like Torch, so when you apply a strand debuff, you can get another 5% damage or so from Torch, right? I think you have to be Radiant, but regardless, like that's seasonal. But even without the seasonal artifact, being able to apply a 40% debuff to an enemy, so that they do, it means that they're doing 40% damage less to you, right? That's essentially 40% damage resistance. That's incredibly good. And if you're on a build where you can afford to spam your class ability often, then you can, just reapply Sever pretty frequently. Plus, the other thing here is that I've noticed that even though Overflow and Control Burst is nice, it's extremely rare that you need to do like a massive reserve dump on an enemy, and let alone one in which you will actually not pause shooting, right? So the thing is, like, yeah, you can shoot 15 shots in a row with Overflow, right, for controlled burst damage, but it's extremely unlikely that you're gonna stop, or that you're gonna be able to keep doing that without ever pausing. And so, like, Slice and Controlled Burst just has much better utility, and you still have 8 shots in the magazine. So, I mean, even then, it's pretty rare that you're going to do a whole mag dump, to take full advantage of Controlled Burst. So I just think that Overflow is just maybe a little bit more niche for Scatter Signal compared to Slice. The origin trait here, Dragon's Vengeance, also. So when you hit critical, it's kind of like a mini pulse monitor, so it actually refills your mag, and gives you a bonus to essentially DPS through charge rate, handling, stuff like that. So that's actually a pretty good origin perk. I haven't really paid much attention to it, but I mean, there's that to consider as well. So you can technically do even more. You can get even more than 8 shots off in the base mag if you're using Slice instead of Overflow, right? On to the next weapon, Imperial Decree. So this weapon drops from the war table, from the Defiant section, and I think it's a recovered Leviathan engram that you have to spend. When you spend those engrams, you will get either Imperial Decree or your class item Sword, right? So Titans get the Throne Cleaver. I'll cover the swords in a minute, but yeah, Imperial Decree is an aggressive frame kinetic shotgun. So currently, now that, kinetic weapons do 10 to 15% more damage than strand and stasis weapons in those slots. Kinetics are just superior. Next season, this might change things up, since they're going to be at parity with strand and stasis, like that kinetic bonus is being removed essentially. But Imperial Decree is extremely good for burst damage, and I actually use this in a rotation with Heart Shadow. So if I want to use Heart Shadow for whatever reason, say Void is surging, or say I just want to synergize with my Void build or play into that Void fantasy, I can just use Heart Shadow, Heavy Swing, swap to Imperial Decree, shoot one shot, swap back to Heart Shadow. I'll do a video on it at some point, but yeah, having auto-loading holster and surrounded. So, I mean, this is very situational. A, I pretty much only plan on using it with Heart Shadow, and B, it's only in certain situations where I can be surrounded. So like Rathiel, maybe Galron, certain dungeon bosses, Crota and Crota's End, right? Easy to get surrounded there. So yeah, I really like this shotgun because it's niche, and because it's, something that I can use for some specific thing. Then I've got Raconteur, and where's my other one? I've got 2. Let me just pull it from my dim real quick so I can cover both of them. Okay, there it is. All right, so on my first one here, this is the first one that I crafted. It has shoot to loot and explosive payload, or explosive head. Precision frame bows are just very good in endgame content, like Grandmasters, anything master. campaign missions, anything where you need, like, for survivability, you can strafe in and out of cover, and it just has incredible range. So for primary weapons, bows are pretty much my favorite weapon there. And yeah, so explosive head with shoot to loot, they synergize, right? So I can pick up ammo bricks at long range, which is going to reload my weapons. And the explosive radius from explosive head can help pick up all of those ammo items, and orbs of power, just as importantly, orbs of power for armor charge, and what other benefits we're using from orbs. So, you know, as far as utility weapons go, I pretty much always have a shoot to loot weapon somewhere, and ideally paired with like explosive payload or explosive head. So that's one of those weapons. Then I've got this other one here because it's a stasis bow. So this Raconteur has headstone and archer's tempo. This one is a ton of fun to synergize with stasis builds, because something like ice flare bolts or the seasonal artifact with the two stasis perks there, like, you could just really spread a lot of stasis crystals everywhere and do a lot of shatter damage. But our headstone is just super nice on stasis weapons, especially if you need to use like a legendary primary or something like that instead of an exotic. Having access to headstone and like easy access, so like a bow is one of the most easy access weapons to get headstone, because precision kills are very easy on bows compared to other weapons. And then, you know, archer's tempo synergizes with those precision kills for, you know, follow-up shots. Popping a stasis crystal, like, that gives you access. It synergizes with Whisper of Shards to give you 500% grenade energy regen. So yeah, this is something that I use on a lot of my stasis builds and really enjoy it. Then I've got here the only non-craftable seasonal weapon that I decided to put in here, which is the Showrunner. And this came out in Season of the Witch. It is a 900 RPM SMG. It's ugly as hell, which is the only unfortunate thing about it, or at least in my opinion. But it rolls with kinetic tremors. So if you're doing any type of encounter where you can't use a exotic primary, or you're using an exotic heavy or special weapon and you need some kind of kinetic primary ad clear weapon, well, this is pretty much your best bet, because SMGs do decent damage in general, but having kinetic tremors can allow you to take out bigger targets and do a little bit of AoE damage and damage over time. So kinetic tremors is pretty nice there. And I think it is the only SMG that actually rolls with kinetic tremors. There might be another one, but I don't think it's a 900 RPM. So yeah, you'll have to go and get spend engrams at the witch table on the recovered red war engrams. Like, that's what you're gonna have to spend. It's gonna give you one of 4 or 5 weapons. So I think the other ones are like Deadpan Delivery, Persuader, which is a void rapid fire sniper rifle, and Nightshade, which is a lightweight strand pulse rifle, but it also drops the Showrunner. So that's the one that I've held on to there. Dynamic Sway paired with kinetic tremors is just kind of nice, because the recoil is a little bit all over the place, especially if you're trying to do sustained damage at longer range to proc kinetic tremors. Then Dynamic Sway is just kind of nice there, and it kind of synergizes with the Origin trait Nadir Focus, but you could also use Vanguard's Vindication for a little bit of health back. Then I've got an Intulit's Return, and this is just a niche shotgun here. It's a rapid fire frame. I've got enhanced autoloading and enhanced cascade point. I've yet to really use it. Also, I've got extended mag, since I'll never have to reload it thanks to autoloading, and that's going to allow you to dump more cascade shots. Full choke here for a little bit of precision. But yeah, basically, if there's a damage rotation on a boss where I can get a couple precision hits and proc cascade point, this thing can do an absolute insane amount of burst damage. You know, cascade point doesn't increase your total damage, it's just your DPS, right? It increases your fire rate by around 30% or something like that. And already being a rapid fire frame, it means that it already has a fast fire rate, so combined with cascade point, it is very hard to control the recoil on it. But if you can, I mean, you could really dump a lot of damage very instantly, kind of like a mini Fourth Horseman. Then I've got a Distant Pull, which is a rapid fire stasis sniper rifle, and I figured that I probably wasn't ever really going to use this. I used it for a certain build in a GM. So what I've got on this is triple tap, enhanced triple tap, and enhanced collective action. Collective action is a 20% damage buff, so I mean it's pretty good. But the thing is, you need elemental pickups to proc it. And so if you're using a build where you have easy access to elemental pickups like ionic traces for certain arc builds, or even hunter for like certain fire sprite builds, or here, because I'm on, it's a stasis weapon, my assumption is I'm going to be making a lot of stasis shards, especially on classes like Behemoth with Tectonic Harvest. And yeah, next season we'll see what the rework is with stasis. It's going to be pretty in-depth, and a lot of it is focused on stasis shard pickups, so this damage perk could be useful there. Also, because of the kinetic nerf, like the bonus to kinetic damage, means that this basically got a a buff by proxy of 15%. So this can be comparable to other weapons like Supremacy. And having triple tap, I mean, that's free ammo, so this could be used for doing decent boss damage, and just good on ammo economy. Then I've got two uncrafted weapons here, or sorry, they're crafted. I just have yet to masterwork them and invest the materials. I've got an Appetance, which is the stasis trace rifle from Season of the Wish, and I did put the perks on it that I plan on enhancing. So I've got Demolitionist and Deconstruct, and I know there's better perks for ad clear, like Killing Tally. You can go Overflow and Killing Tally. There's Headstone, but the thing is, I don't like legendary trace rifles really for ad clear, except for like my Acacia's Dejection with Incandescent on like a Cenotaph build. But yeah, this is basically for a Cenotaph build, and without like an ad clear roll or perk, I would never really plan on using it for ad clear. It would just be for the purpose of Cenotaph and marking targets. So the idea here with Deconstruct is, yeah, it gives you a 40% damage buff versus vehicles and constructs, which could be useful. But the main thing is, when you do sustained damage, you get ammo refunded to you, right? And I might question that choice, because Cenotaph is basically gives you reconstruction on your trace rifles anyways. But yeah, I mean, basically I'm going to be using this very sparingly. It's not going to be for damage, it's going to be for marking targets, and it's just kind of a bonus that I can have Deconstruct on there for potentially that extra damage buff, and Demolitionist for potentially some grenade energy. But yeah, the perks not super relative there. It's just more the fact that this is the only legendary trace rifle that I can use with Cenotaph in the kinetic slot. Then there's a different times, which I just went ahead and crafted this after already deleting it previously, because I mean, it's a pulse rifle and the current state of pulse rifles is horrible. But next season they're getting pretty massive damage buff, and rapid fire frames are going to be basically the highest damage pulse rifles, and they're best suited for close quarter combat. So kind of like if you need to use a pulse and you want to use it as a close to medium range weapon, then rapid fires are a pretty good bet there. If you're doing longer range, then high impacts will be the way to go. But on this one, it's Strand, so I decided to pair it with Hatchling and Subsistence. Pretty straightforward. Get lots of kills, hardly ever have to reload, have your little threadlings going around doing damage, refilling your mag. So it could be decent for ad clear in certain situations where I can't afford to use an exotic primary like Quicksilver Storm or Wishkeeper or the Sidearm or whatever. So now on to the energy slot here. I've got an Eremite, and this was all hyped up, of course, when it came out with Season of the Witch. It was, I think, the first controlled burst weapon, and high impacts did kind of essentially got buffed, or other fusions got nerfed during that season, so that high impacts were basically the total damage and DPS king of fusion rifles. It was also during Season of the Crota, so this was very popular to use on Crota if you had to use like Tractor Cannon. So if you're using Dragon's Breath or Tractor Cannon, some kind of damage over time, heavy, then this is a very good weapon to swap to do sustained damage, because controlled burst, like I already talked about with scatter signal, 20% extra damage. With Envious Assassin, it's essentially like the overflow version that scatter signal has. You can basically dump all your reserves on controlled burst aside from that one shot, so that's pretty good there. You can also replace controlled burst with Envious Assassin and have like 10 or sorry with the reservoir burst, and you can have like up to 10 reservoir burst shots in a row, which is pretty insane, because reservoir burst is 20% damage. It doesn't require you to proc it first. As long as your magazine is at the top of the mag or overflowed, all those shots will be reservoir burst shots, and it'll cause explosion on impact as well, or on kills for AoE. So theoretically better than controlled burst, but it requires obviously it requires your magazine to be at the top or overflowed. That's the difference. Then I've got a Brya's Love, which is a void precision frame scout rifle, and the only reason I really crafted it was because it's shoot to loot and explosive payload, so I've got that utility option there. And it goes really well on like a Gerfalcon's build, where if I'm using like Commemoration or Void Machine Gun for constant volatile rounds, like if I'm doing a lot of ad clear with my heavy weapon, or my kinetic slot weapon, then Brya's Love can just be kind of nice to switch over to, get the occasional kill, but more importantly pick up ammo bricks and orbs of power to keep that armor charge up and going, and just stay stocked up on the ammo and reload it, right? Then I've got the Lethophobia, which is the lightweight void bow that rolled out with Season of the Wish. It's got explosive head and repulsive brace. I mean, explosive head is just, aside from the utility of pairing it with like shoot to loot, it's just always a good damage perk in general. It's a static 15% damage buff essentially without any damage fall off, has infinite range, plus area of effect. Super good with if it's in the artifact for a champion stun, because it means that you don't even have to hit a champion to stun them. But yeah, this is the only void bow that rolls with repulsor brace, and I already have like an Under Your Skin, and which is a precision frame bow, arguably better with land tank. So I mean, I use Under Your Skin a lot, but this is the only void bow that you can pair with Gerfalcon's Hauberk for repulsor brace. So yeah, pretty nice there. Then on to Adhorative, which rolled out with Season of the Wish as well. It is one of the Undying weapons, one of the 4 Undying weapons that you can craft, and this thing is an adaptive frame solar pulse rifle, and it rolls with Heal Clip and Incandescent, which is just a super good combo, both enhanced. The only unfortunate thing about this weapon is that it is an adaptive frame, which is essentially the worst frame for pulse rifles as far as damage. And currently pulse rifles are horrible, but next season they might very well be meta as far as legendary primary weapons. So even if it's only an adaptive, I mean, adaptives feel really good to use. Like the recoil on them is not bad. So I mean, this would just be a very good weapon to synergize with like Ember of Benevolence, or just have access to healing on other subclasses, be a team player, that kind of thing, right? So just a good solar synergy weapon there. Then I've got a Royal Executioner. I used to have 2 of these fully masterwork, but I deleted my other one. The other one was Envious Assassin and Reservoir Burst, but because Royal Executioner is an adaptive frame solar fusion rifle, it is essentially the worst fusion rifle for DPS and total damage compared to a high impact like Eremite. So that's why I got rid of my Envious Assassin and Reservoir Burst roll, because I could literally just put that on a better framed fusion rifle like Eremite of the same element. But I did hang on to this one Royal Executioner, which is actually the first one I crafted, because it's got Grave Robber and Swashbuckler, so it synergizes really well with like Bonk Titan or Knife Trick and Knock 'em down on Gunslinger, because you're just constantly getting those solar kills. I mean, Swashbuckler's like a 30-35% damage buff, and then you never have to reload because it's Grave Robber. So this just has a lot of good synergy between the weapon and solar subclasses. So that's why I'm holding on to that. And you don't need to have the best total damage or DPS out of a fusion rifle to use it in like content such as weekly campaign missions or nightfalls, and where you're just using it on select targets like champs and yellow bars and tanky red bars. It's plenty good for that, right? Then I've got two unmasterworked weapons in the elemental slot here. I've got an Optative or Optative, which is a void 180 hand cannon, one of many that we have access to in the game. So that's why I haven't masterworked it, because I've got like 3 words of Crota that I use that are fully crafted, which are also 180 void hand cannons, and they're from a raid, so they're better. But this one is unique. It's got attrition orbs and deconstruct, which I just thought was kind of a unique combo. I don't know if I'll ever use this, but if I'm doing some kind of mission, like maybe like 0 Hour or wherever there's a lot of ads, or vehicles, I should say, deconstruct gives you a 40% damage buff versus those vehicles, so that's nice. It also refills your mag as you do damage. Nano munition also works the same. It gives you ammo. Yeah, it slowly builds up an emergency ammo refill. I'm not even going to read it out. Basically, it passively gives you ammo every now and then. Like most origin traits, it's not super relevant, but yeah, I guess it would synergize with deconstruct. And then attrition orbs, because the whole principle with deconstruct is to do sustained damage, then maybe I can spawn some orbs. I'm not a big fan of attrition orbs, and I think this is probably the only weapon that I have it on. But if I were to ever experiment with it, it would be on this hand cannon. But this is obviously a very niche role, and it's unique, which is the only reason I have it crafted. It does also roll with demo and wellspring, but I wouldn't really want to use a weapon like this that doesn't have good stats compared to like Word of Crota without any damage perks just to get a little extra grenade energy. I don't think it'd be worth it, especially being a primary weapon. So yeah, that's what I'm going to use there, is attrition orbs and deconstruct. And then there's subjunctive here, which I actually wasn't even going to craft, but I went ahead and brought it up to level 10 and put the perks on it that I thought would go best just to show you. But I've already got like an Ikelos SMG with Volt Shot, and I've got a Brigand's Law with Volt Shot, and I've got a Tarnished Metal with Volt Shot, so I'm not really hurting for arc primary weapons with Volt Shot, but this is a 900 RPM SMG, so it's very good. So Threat Detector and Volt Shot just go really well together. So yeah, if you do not yet have a Volt Shot SMG, then I would highly recommend you go and get that from Riven as well. Then on to the heavy slot. I've got 3 doomed petitioners here, one fully masterwork, the others I'm still waiting on a use case where I'm absolutely going to use it, in which case I'll go ahead and enhance them. But on this one here, I've got Reconstruction and Surrounded. Surrounded is like 40 plus damage buff, so I mean it's absolutely nuts. And there's not very many situations where you use Surrounded, but for example, in Crota's End on Yrute, she's a very easy boss to get surrounded. So like typically I use Briar's Contempt there, but if I want to do it on master difficulty and say Void is the burn that week and there's no solar burn, then I would go ahead and I would use Doomed Petitioner instead of Briar's. So yeah, just a very good linear fusion rifle in general, because it's an aggressive frame and because it has access to an extremely high damage perk. The other 2 rolls here, I've brought them up to level 10 again just to put the base perks, not enhanced, on them. But Reconstruction, Deconstruct, right? So Reconstruction is actively filling the magazine, or passively I should say, passively filling the magazine in the background. Deconstruct is going to actively refill the magazine as I do damage, plus 40% damage versus vehicles and constructs without the condition of having to be surrounded for a higher damage buff. So this is extremely good for certain situations. So I do plan on potentially using that as well, and Dragon's Vengeance is just kind of nice with both those perks, right? Because they're all reload perks, right? Dragon's Vengeance. So technically, even if I expend all my ammo with Reconstruction and Deconstruct, which it's very well possible that I might be able to actually dump all my reserves without ever having to reload, but if I ever do come close to needing to reload and I get critical on health, the Dragon's Vengeance can also refill the mag. So that's kind of some interesting synergy there. Then on the other roll here is Envious Assassin and Precision Instrument. This is probably the best precision instrument heavy weapon in the game. Well, A, because linear fusion rifles and machine guns are basically the only precision weapons in the heavy slot, but Precision Instrument got buffed to give you a 30% damage buff on sustained hits, and because it's an aggressive frame 3-burst shot, you can actually build up those Precision Instrument stacks faster. So I do plan on using this in certain situations where I can afford to overflow my mag or easily overflow it with Envious Assassin, and then that way I can just use as much ammo, like do a total reserve dump if possible of Precision Instrument. It is a punishing perks because if you miss any shot, you basically lose all your stacks. But you know, I'm kind of thinking as long as you have like targeting and unflinching, that should help out enough. And then again, Dragon's Vengeance there could possibly help you do a total reserve dump with an automatic refill of your clip at some point. Then there's Regnant, so 2 other Void Heavy weapons here. Well, 1, I've just got 2 copies, and now we've got Edge Transit rolling from Into the Light from the Brave Arsenal there, so I probably won't be using these as much anymore, but this is one of the original Cascade Point weapons, auto-loading and Cascade, so I've got double enhanced perks here. This is just really nice if I'm going to do a damage rotation with like a good sniper rifle or something like that where I can land precision hits. This thing is always going to have its magazine topped up because of auto-loading holster, and then I could just do a massive amount of immediate burst damage with Cascade Point. And keep in mind, because boss spec is being rolled into basically all weapons, like we're not going to have access to it anymore as a mod. It means that you can afford to run backup mag instead, which means that I can have 7 in the mag, which means that Cascade Point is better used, right? I'm going to be because if the mag was stuck at 5, then it means you would be losing out on some of your potential damage of Cascade Point, because I think you can dump up to 9 grenades on the Cascade Point timer. So having 7 in the mag is, you know, it's not like fully optimal, but it's still pretty good and makes good use out of Cascade Point. However, now that we have Edge Transit with Cascade Point and Bait and Switch, you know, it might be less likely that I'll ever use it again. But then I've got this other one here, this other Regnant with auto-loading and explosive light, and again you can run backup mag now that boss spec is going away, which brings the magazine up to 7, and you can get up to 7 stacks of explosive light with an enhanced explosive light, which makes this thing really good for just doing mag dumps, right? Like if you can afford to go and get orbs of power and do a mag dump, go get more orbs and then do a mag dump, this is the weapon for that, right? So either very long damage phases versus bosses where there's adds to kill in between and orbs to harvest, or for just short amount of burst damage, right? The one downside to using explosive light on grenade launchers is that unlike rocket launchers, like especially adaptive and aggressive rocket launchers, you could essentially get enough explosive light stacks to cover almost all your reserves, right? Because you only have like 7 rockets at base. So if you get 7 stacks of explosive light, it means that every single rocket is doing 25% more damage, right? And extra blast radius. On grenade launchers, because you have like, I can't remember how many grenades you have now, but you have like 20 grenades, it means that most of your reserves are not going to be benefiting from explosive light, right? So that's why Bait and Switch is so much better. Not only is it a higher damage buff, but it can cover all of your ammo. Whereas explosive light is, you know, it's conditional. You have to go and get those orbs, and then you've only got 7 total max, right? But yes, still pretty good in certain situations there. Then I've got this Semiotician with field prep and bipod, and because it's a high impact frame rocket launcher, which is not the best for damage, but it is close to adaptives and aggressives, but it has a higher blast radius, so it's better for ad clear situations. But it also got a reserve bump recently, right? So high impacts now have, I think, 9 rockets at base. Then bipod gives you basically 2 rockets. It almost gives you double the rockets, right? The rockets do 25% less damage, but you get so many. So like I think you can get up to 16 or 17 rockets with this thing because it has enhanced field prep and enhanced bipod. So very good for like grandmasters, GMs, certain content like that. Yeah, and it's the only strand rocket launcher that that doesn't come from Eva Levante, right? I think the other one's from Solstice, and it's a precision. But yeah, so this is a little bit more accessible, so you might want to get that since there's really no other strand rocket launchers currently available, at least. Then I've got this thin Precipice here, which has Tireless Blade and Hatchling, both enhanced. It's a vortex frame sword, so I mean, and I've got ad clear rolls on it. So this is basically for ad clear, and I use this almost exclusively on my strand builds in the Abyss encounter in Crota's End, right? Because you're always on the move. I can just not only can I sword skate with this thing to get through the Abyss quicker, but I can kill enemies and produce threadlings from hatchling and get ammo refunded to me, which is just really nice, right? Because it's going to do passive damage while I'm getting from point A to point B. So it's pretty decent for that. But we've also got the caster frame from Warlord's Ruin. So I mean, it's definitely not pressing that you get that, but I do enjoy to use it in those certain situations. Then I've got a Caretaker here. So this one rolls from the Defiant section of the War Table, and yeah, it's a Defiant weapon. I'm not a huge fan of the aesthetic of these Defiant weapons, but again, this is Tireless Blade and Incandescent, so this could be used in the same way that Tireless Blade and Hatchling can be used on Thin Precipice, just for doing general ad clear. You know, not something I use all that often, but yeah, occasionally, like if I wanted to use Solar in the Abyss encounter or something like that, or do some kind of encounter where I'm using a sword for ad clear, this would be pretty good for that. But yeah, so now on to the class-specific swords that I've kept here. And speaking on that last roll with Caretaker, on my Throne Cleaver, which is a much better sword than Caretaker, at least for Titans, especially on a Strongholds build, Tireless Blade and Incandescent, super good. I know you can get like Surrounded, and you can get that debuff perk on here as well, but I just don't really find that Throne Cleaver is that great or practical to use on bosses. I'd rather just use Lament or Bequest or Heart Shadow or something like that, but you definitely can. Like, I am considering making a second roll with Surrounded. In fact, I used to have Surrounded on this, but I ended up switching it because I just found that I wasn't going to use it on bosses. So I decided this is a much better ad clear weapon. Like, I used this to do Legend Onslaught. Actually, my first Legend Onslaught build was with a Stronghold Solar Titan build. This thing's nuts. Like, you can get so much ammo from Enhanced Tireless Blade. You know, you get ammo back on basically every other kill, and then Enhanced Incandescent, just constantly spreading Scorch. The fact that you can like one-shot like tanky red bars and basically all ads and get an Incandescent explosion with it, it's just yeah, it can really chain into ignitions pretty quick, and yeah, it's very good. The other weapon here that I've yet to enhance is my Goldtusk for Hunter. And the only reason I haven't is because I have Bequest from Deepstone Crypt, which is just the best arc sword to use, like for DPS versus Crota or other bosses, because if you can get Surrounded, right? So my Bequest has Surrounded, but this thing is just really good for would be good for ad clear in general because it has Relentless Strikes, and then Whirlwind Blade to stack up that damage very fast because it's a lightweight frame, which is unique, right? So kind of like the Titan Sword is unique, being an aggressive frame. The Hunter is the only class that has access to a lightweight frame sword, so I mean, you get that extra mobility, which is pretty nice. And this thing performs extremely well on Crota as well. I would say that Bequest is still a little bit better, but some people just swear by Goldtusk. So I definitely plan on eventually enhancing these perks, potentially using it, so I'd recommend that. The Warlock one, if you're wondering where Death's Razor is, I have it crafted or I have the pattern, but it's a vortex frame. So there's nothing unique about it when you have other vortex frames, void swords like Falling Guillotine, right? Plus it's a vortex, so it's not that great for boss damage, and Falling Guillotine has access to much better perks, right? So it's a little bit unfortunate there for the Warlock sword. So yeah, that's all my craftable weapons. Hopefully that gives you an idea of what you should go and acquire as far as your daily red frames and your patterns. So there's all the weapons that I've decided to hang on to, and what I would recommend that you at least get the patterns for, so that you'll have access to these weapons basically permanently, and you can bring those into the final shape and craft them the way that you want them, but you have my input on them as well. So hopefully you enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.